Hello, everybody, and welcome in to what is the first episode of hopefully many of Speakin' Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. I'm joined to
Ricardo
my right.
Right here.
That's what we're talking about. And we're talking all things Steelers and Eagles right now around the landscape of what is the end of summer workouts, spring workouts, and a little bit of a lull period, but still plenty of news regarding the two teams that we're covering. Ricardo, how you feeling, my man?
I mean, I'm feeling good overall. I mean, about the Eagles overall this season, I have some pretty high expectations. And about recent news about the Eagles, we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, man, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I'm super excited. And yeah, I mean, I think we should just dive right into it.
Let's do it, man.
Sounds good. All right, I guess the big news we got to start with here is my man Minkah Fitzpatrick got paid.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Okay, ready? That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, just breaking down the contract, signed to an extension, 4 years, $73.6 million. And that is on top of the 1 year that he has left on his contract. So
yes.
He gets paid, and they do it well before training camp starts. So there's not going to be a conversation ongoing regarding his contract going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about the numbers too, and it's just like going off of like this past season alone. I don't know if he deserved it, but if we talk about his overall stats, I think maybe that this contract makes sense. But I mean, putting it into context, like the other safeties that are paid more, like he's paid obviously the most. Now over Jamal Adams, like Harrison Smith from the Vikings, the Broncos, Justin Simmons, who actually had the most guaranteed money prior to Minkah Fitzpatrick signing this deal. And even Budda Baker, who makes 14.75. So now it's all Minkah, he reset the market. Basically, it's all him. I mean, like I'm just curious as to your thoughts on it. Like, do you think this deal is worth it? Like, he deserves to be
I definitely like the move a lot. For two reasons. One, the fact that he is such an integral part of this defense. Outside of TJ Watt and Cameron Hayward, you can make the case with Joe Hayden no longer on the roster that there's no other player on this defense outside of TJ Watt and Cam Hayward who is more important to what they try and do. So to keep this guy in here, you bring him back long term. He's going into his age 26 season, I believe, this year. Mm-hmm. So while you may worry about like the back end of this contract 5 years from now, whether he's still going to be effective, I'm okay with it too, because the Steelers are going to have cap room going forward because Cam Hayward's contract is going to come off the books in a few years. And if Kenny Pickett pans out as your quarterback, his fifth-year option would only be the last year of this deal for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I think it's a plus. And the second reason I think it's great is because you've got other pieces that you're going to have to worry about extending going forward. Chris Boswell, who we're going to talk about later, needs a new contract. Deontay Johnson's going to need a new contract. So the fact that you can get this out of the way and it's not a distraction going forward, I think is huge for this team.
Mm-hmm. No, I honestly kind of agree with that. Although in terms of like I was saying before, the stats this past year, he had 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. I mean, he did have 121 combined tackles. But I mean, yeah, I can see the argument both ways in the sense that like people tend to look at like the last year's production and they're like, oh, that was kind of a down year. And then you look at like I looked at a Pro Football Focus. I believe his grade was like the 8th highest among safeties, which isn't really that high. He was under quite a few safeties.
Was it specifically, was it all safeties or was it just free safeties?
I said all safeties when I looked on
all
it.
Safeties.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Some of those include Kevin Byard, Antoine Winfield Jr., Marcus Williams, Jesse Bates, Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs, even like Javon Holland from the Seahawks. So I just found it interesting that his grade, was like a 59.8 out of all the other ones. And I
think you could even make the case that part of the reason it makes sense, even though maybe compared around the league, he's not quite there. And I still believe he's one of the top safeties in the league, especially at the free safety position. And if he can get back to more kind of that ball hawk, free roamer type safety, as well as, kind of putting it together with the 121 combined tackles, like you said last year, I think, he could still have some of the best seasons of his career going forward. But then it's the fact too that on the Steelers defense, you don't have Joe Hayden anymore, and at the
Right.
cornerback position, you really don't have a lot of guys that you kind of have to worry about paying big money, at least in the next year or two. So if he's the key piece on your among your defensive backs and on the backside of that defense, I think it makes sense just to lock him up, even if necessarily you might have had somewhat of a statistical down year. But it's not even like it was really a terrible year. I
No,
mean, he
no.
still had you could still see the impact he was making on the football field, even
Yeah.
if the statistics weren't necessarily getting stockpiled like they have in years past.
Right, right. So how much, if you're like a GM, how much do you take like statistics into account of the last year, or as opposed to like overall like career?
I mean, I think it has to be a factor, but I think you just look at what he's done for you as a whole. I mean, you could go back to when they acquired him, which I know was 3 years ago, but the impact that he made immediately on that defense was seen. And that was
Yeah.
a season when I think he had 5 or 6 interceptions that first year he came over from the Dolphins. And while he hasn't put up the same interception numbers, we've seen him be involved in a lot of different ways, whether it was, racking up a bunch of tackles like he did this year, or just, he's not really used quite as much as a free roamer anymore. That was more when he was with the Dolphins.
Hmm.
But I think the Steelers have really been able to utilize him well. And I think even if the numbers aren't necessarily there, you know what you're getting as far as a presence on the defense, which I think as long as it fits into the scheme, and the Steelers have been able to do that in the past, I think you got to keep him there. And that's what they did here with this contract.
Yeah, no, I really like watching Minkah Fitzpatrick, even when he was with the Dolphins, even before the Steelers. But yeah, I'm a bit more. I mean, I look at numbers a bit more, and I'm like, maybe. I mean, you're sort of betting on his upside, which is fair because he's still young and he might not even be in the prime of his career at this point. So, like, I
Yeah,
like the deal. I could see some like risk, like there's some risk in it, but I think overall it's a solid deal.
I see the other side too because it is a safety. It's not necessarily a like premier position you need to pay, but
Right, right.
I think it's also like partially from the fact that I guess I don't know. Part of it to me is like, what's the alternative? If you don't bring
Right,
back
right,
Minkah
right.
Fitzpatrick, you don't really have a better option there at free safety. And then if you don't give him a contract before the season starts, then you go through training camp with all these questions. Then you go through the season with this looming over his head that he has to have a good statistical year if he
Right.
potentially isn't going to be on the Steelers next year. So you lock him up. I think you let him play a little more mentally free because he has this to fall back on, and I think that's going to yield results.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense that it got locked up before training camp and all that starts before
Yeah, and
preseason.
now
Yeah,
the
that makes
focus is going to shift to some other positions that they have that they're going to have to address. Before training camp, during training camp, with potential contract extensions that we'll get into down the road. But
yeah.
I don't know. Do you have anything else to add on Minka, or do you want to move on?
No, that's actually a perfect segue because you said talking about positions. I mean, Stephon Tuitt
Yeah,
retired
on to
recently.
it.
I mean, I know you have some feelings about that, and so I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts and opinions on that?
So I don't. I understand why he retired. Like obviously, the tragic death of his brother was like a big part of him. Kind of wanting to focus on other things other than football in his life, which is totally understandable. I'm
Yeah,
never going to blame a guy for wanting to move on, and it's like any other. It's any other thing in life. You want to choose a different career path, so be it. You're free to do that.
yeah.
But the problem is that the timing of this just really sucks for the Steelers because if there would have been an indication of this a few months prior, which doesn't seem like it was the case because all of his teammates seemed to think that he was going to be coming back. But if
Mhm.
there was indication of this prior, then you could have brought in someone else to fill that void. I truly believe they would have brought in another defensive end to kind of fill his role, other than
Mhm.
rolling with Chris Wormley and Tyson
Yeah,
Alulu, who's 35 and is going to be coming off of a major injury where he missed all of last year. So I mean,
exactly.
that's pretty concerning that they didn't have it. So I mean, going forward into training camp, there's a few options there, but it's definitely going to leave a big void. And I think that the Steelers are definitely going to try and potentially when training camp cuts come around, maybe sign a veteran later on. I actually have some interesting stats here that I wanted to run by you because this really
Yeah, yeah,
caught
yeah.
my eye. So the Steelers' rush defense with him in 2020, when he was on the roster, Tyson Alulu was healthy.
Hmm.
Their rushing defense was 11th in rush yards against, 12th in rush yards per attempt against, 11th in rush yards per game against, and 9th in rushing TDs against, with 13 on that season. So they were middle of the pack. It was nothing crazy. they weren't top of the league against the run, but they certainly held their own.
Yeah.
Then you fast forward to 2021 when Stephon Tuitt isn't playing the entire season. They're last in rush yards against, last in rushing yards per attempt against, last in rushing yards per game against, and they were 21st in rushing touchdowns against. So they were one of the worst defenses against the run when he wasn't there. Now, again, they're going to get Tyson Alualu back this year, but he's also in his mid-30s. So you don't know how much you're really going to get out of him. So this is concerning now that you pretty much have the same holes on your roster, and the main person you're relying on to fill that is this guy, Tyson Alualu, who hasn't played healthy football in over a year, and you really don't know what you're going to get out of him coming off the injury.
Right. I mean, clearly that speaks volumes of like how big of a loss he was this past season and will continue to be this upcoming season. So what do you think? How do you think this Steelers defense can improve without him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that they kind of have to worry about is, I mean, first I think you have to figure out if you have an immediate replacement on your roster, which I don't know if you necessarily do. I mean, I talked about how they're going to use Alualu, and they have Chris Wormley on their roster still, who actually statistically, this kind of relates to the talk that we just had last year, or a little bit ago with Minkah Fitzpatrick, and how he didn't necessarily put up the stats, but I still felt like he made an impact on the field. You can look at Chris Wormley instead, who last year in 15 games had 7 sacks and 51 combined tackles, which isn't terrible, but still, I mean, the results didn't show because how bad the defense was against the run.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe if he can build off of what he did last year, that could be a factor that is part of it. And then I know Mark Cabali, who's a beat reporter for The Athletic on the Steelers, he's talked about how Isaiah Loudermilk, their 5th-round pick from last year's, put on muscle, but I'm not going to put all the eggs in that basket either. They also drafted DeMarvin Leal. I think the big thing that kind of has to happen is you have to look to sign a veteran at some point in training camp just to add something to it, even if it's, when we're getting towards the middle of the preseason, to just bring in another veteran presence. And then I think also it's how the deployment of the linebackers happen, because you brought in Miles Jack, and we need to see improvement of Devin Bush. Supposedly, Ryan Flores has had a big impact on helping him so far in just OTAs and mini camps. So I think their deployment of the linebackers in the run game is also going to be big, but it's a big hole to fill. I don't know if you think that they can do anything differently there.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, the ends apart from him aren't very inspiring, other than Wormley, really. So I mean, I don't know if the Steelers would be willing to give up draft picks for like maybe a veteran to bring in, someone a bit more established. I don't know if that's like a logical option. I mean, you might just have to bite the bullet and go with what you have. Honestly, I don't know what else you.
It's starting to appear that might be the case. Now, I will say, last year towards the end of training camp, they brought in Melvin Ingram as a free agent, just to build some depth behind T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. Ultimately, asked for a trade because he wasn't happy there.
Right.
But he was unhappy with his playing time. But I could see them doing something similar, just to add like a veteran presence in there, who's maybe a little younger than Alualu, who maybe has worn out his welcome with his current team. I mean, it's something to consider, because if you're telling me that we're going in there with 35-year-old Alualu, Chris Wormley, who you're unsure really what you're going to get out of if he can replicate last season and build off of it, Loudermilk, who was a 5th-round pick, and then rookie DeMarvin Leal, it's very uninspiring, like you said, and I think it's going to lead to more problems for the Steelers. God forbid anyone gets injured on that front defensive line too. But, I mean, I don't know if I really have much more to add there, unless you do. I know we're going to have an episode coming up where we actually break down both of these teams' defensive lines. But other than that, I mean, it's definitely a concerning situation right now that the Steelers are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on, but I mean, it's a little concerning, and you just got to hope that that they can hold their own during the season. But we'll see. Only time will tell.
Time will definitely tell. So where do you want to move on to next? You want to talk about Devon Allen?
Yeah, let's go with them. Let's go. Oh my goodness. Obviously, wide receiver. I mean, he played for Oregon. He's trying out to make the Eagles roster. And I mean, incredibly fast, like the 3rd fastest. What was it? Like 110-meter hurdles.
I wrote it down here. 3rd fastest
in history.
World record time in history in the 110-meter hurdles. And he ran it at 12.84 seconds, which was only 0.04 of a second off the world record, which is pretty incredible.
No, that's absolutely insane. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love his speed. And all that. But like, it's one thing to be really fast, and then it's a totally different to be able to run routes, to be able to catch a ball. I mean, yeah, he played with Oregon, sure, but it's like I don't know.
What do you think? Does this guy have any chance of making the roster?
Honestly,
I mean, the
anyone
Eagles
over.
need a speed guy, don't they? They don't really have a
I mean, we
pop.
sort of have Quez Watkins to be our third, like a speed receiver. I mean, that's like fine. He could be like a wide receiver, like our fifth receiver, perhaps. Anyone over Jalen Reagor, honestly, I just, God, me and Jalen Reagor don't get along. Clearly, will never forgive Howie Roseman for passing him, for passing Justin Jefferson over him. Whatever. It's moving on. But yeah, I maybe there's a chance. I mean, we have Greg Ward, who's more of a like slot receiver, who's like not very fast, more possession kind of receiver. John Hightower, a former like late round pick of ours, who probably won't make the roster. Zach Pascal, who we signed this past offseason.
I like Pascal a lot. I like that.
I think he could be. I think he'll be our like wide receiver 4 at the worst.
That also provides you like he's an experienced guy who's got targets before. And I know we're not breaking down the wide receiver room necessarily, but I mean, just to say, I mean, if someone goes down, that's a nice depth piece to have.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure would love to keep Pascal. So that'd be what? So the starters obviously be AJ Brown. Thank God Howie Roseman traded for him. Devontae Smith, second year. I already loved him in his first year. Who else am I forgetting? I mean, Rager's probably going to stay on the team. Which
and then it's probably Quez. So what do you think? Is there room for Allen on the roster or no? Like if you had to say right now.
As a fifth receiver, like he's fringe fifth receiver, but I don't think the Eagles. I mean, they could keep 6, but it's going to be very difficult.
I'm going to say right now, I think there's no shot this guy makes the roster.
I
get it's a cool story. Let me just tell you why real quick. Let me tell you why. All right, it's a good story and all. Cool. You can run hurdles really, really freaking fast. But the dude's 27 years old. His 40 time he ran this year was actually was a 4.35, which wasn't even one of the fastest ones of the guys who ran in the combine at this year's draft.
Yeah.
And he's also had 2 ACL tears previously in his career. And you've also said it before. There's a difference between being fast, which honestly, I don't even know how fast he is in game compared to just, running hurdles.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that translates. And I mean, listen to this. He's only caught 13 passes since 2014 when he was a freshman at college.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's hard to expect this guy to come in and actually be a factor on an Eagles team that's already loaded at wide receiver and has a lot of options. I don't know if I want to say loaded, but I mean, there's a lot of pieces who I think are going to be in the pecking order before him.
Yeah.
So it's a cool story. And hey, I don't want to take anything out of him. Back in the day, what was his name? Vince Papale. Didn't he make the roster? And he was he came in just off the street. So I mean, I don't want to say nothing's impossible with this Eagles wide receiver room. But
I mean, Travis Fulgham a couple years ago.
I'm not buying Travis Fulgham. Yeah, I'm not buying into it though.
No, I mean, just for the story, I would love for him to make it, but I honestly don't. I mean, I'm more realistic, and I don't think he'll make it. But just for the story, that would be cool.
It would be cool.
But yeah. So
all right, man. Before anything else?
Logo.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we get into the position group, what do you think of this new Eagles logo?
Here, let me show you the old one. This is the old one, right? I wish I had the new one printed out, but it looks like, what I first thought of it? My brother said this too. He was like, it looks like the Giants, New York Giants, and the Jets sort of logo. It's like the font of it looks really weird and does not.
That's actually kind of true.
Right? And I was like, I don't want to be associated with those teams.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm an Eagles fan, rivals with the Giants. And it's like, this one fits really well with the current bird logo that we have, but the new logo does not at all. It just
they clash almost. They the bird and the word mark clash.
Yeah,
they don't fit. I agree with you. The old one fit beautifully with the eagle that was it was kind of angled a little bit, and then it was the word over top. It was perfect.
That worked really well. And Bleeding Green Nation, I mean, I read this yesterday. I was like, yeah, this is definitely more of a downgrade than it is anything modernized or whatever the hell the Eagles were thinking. But yeah, I'm not a fan of it. But whatever. It's only one. Yeah. It's just a small thing. But I guess for branding purposes, I don't know if it'll go over well. I mean, Eagles fans aren't very thrilled with it either. But it is what it is. Can't change it now. But
not much positive. All right, so much for the logo. We'll see if it sticks. They'll probably switch it again in a year, and then they'll make more money off of the new jersey.
As long as we don't end up like Washington, it's fine.
Yeah. All right, so with that, I think we're going to move on to a segment that we're going to do on these weekly episodes where we're going to break down and set our expectations for each different position group. For week 1, we're starting out with special teams, kickers, punters, kick returners, all that good stuff.
The best
Um,
position group.
I think I think the best way to do it is 1 week we'll do Steelers first, Eagles second, and then the next week we'll do vice versa. So we'll just go back and forth. So I don't know. This week, what do we want to do? Flip a coin for who goes first?
I mean, you could just go for it. I mean, I don't really have a preference, but
All right,
I'll go first next week.
We'll do Steelers first, and then next week we'll do the Eagles first. With I believe we said defensive line was going to be next week, or
yeah, I believe
one of the maybe defensive backs. We got a defensive position coming at you next week, but
yeah.
For this week we are doing special teams first. And all right, I guess I'll start off with the Steelers. I mean, first and foremost is Chris Boswell. It starts with the kicker. You could make the case with Chris Boswell that he's the greatest Steelers kicker of all time right now if his career ended tomorrow. I wouldn't be afraid to say that. Here's a stat that I read the other day on The Athletic that I think is incredible. In the history of the NFL, where do you think he ranks among the most accurate kickers of all time? I'll say his field goal made percentage is 88.3%. Where does he rank all time? And another hint, he's in the top 10.
I was going to say top 10 definitely then. I will say 6th.
He's 4th all time in field goal accuracy.
Wow, really?
And that's with 2018 where he was awful. I think he was like 60%
terrible
on field goals. Yeah, they only let him attempt like 20 because he got so bad near the end of the year.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. Wow.
But I mean, outside of that, what was the other stat here? So of his 7 seasons, 5 of them he's been 90% or better on his field goal percentages. And I mean, you also got to take account he's doing that in Heinz Field, which is one of the hardest stadiums to kick in and be accurate. So it's pretty incredible the longevity he's had kicking. And in my opinion, the Steelers need to get this guy re-signed, especially when you look around the league and how many teams have awful kicking situations.
Yep.
This is a guy that you need to lock him up. You could make the case he's top 5, top 3 best kickers in the NFL right now. Obviously, Justin Tucker's the best, but outside of him, I think you could make the case he's right up there in the top 3. Last season alone, 90% on field goals, 90% on extra, 95% on extra point percentages. So, in my opinion, this guy needs a new contract. And Justin Tucker's making $5 million a year annually on his contract. I think that Chris Boswell, give him $4.5 to $5 million annually. Be happy and let this guy be your kicker for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's been really accurate, really good, really consistent the last, couple seasons. Not including 2018, of course, but yeah, no, great kicker overall. I mean, definitely you should lock him up.
Yeah, and I mean, especially because that other season I mentioned too, where he had a little bit of a down year, that was only his sophomore season in the league. So since 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, he's been one of the best kickers in the league.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. I also made the mistake before his 2021 stats. He actually wasn't 95% on extra points. He was 36 for 40. I don't know what the percentage comes out at. But I was writing for his expectations. I expect him to replicate what he's done the last 3 years, be over 90% on your field goal percentage, and be like around 95% on extra points. And I'll be happy. Give him the new contract, and I think we're good to go. I don't think there's much else to say with Chris Boswell. And yeah, I mean, I'll move on to the punting situation now, which, I think it's interesting. Presley Harvin, his dad and his grandmother died last year during the season. And I mean, the coaching staff kind of praised how he still was able to handle that and still keep his poise and be a part of the team. That being said, props for him. I think that's good DNA that he's got. There needs to be more consistency from him week in and week out. He had some games last year. He wasn't punting the ball good. His numbers weren't great last year. He was actually 28th in gross punting average yards. And his punts inside, he only had 25 punts inside the opponent's 20-yard line. So not great. I think he can boost that up a little bit. He's locked in as the Steelers punter for this year. So there's not really a second option. It's going to be him. But I think he's got the makeup and the potential to improve on last season.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a big guy. I mean, yeah, he's definitely got potential to become a better punter overall. But yeah, just that first thing you said about his grandma and passing away and all, that's You know, that must have been a factor in like maybe like how he performed, but
Yeah, his
um, I,
grandma and his dad, both of
yeah,
them
grandma
passed
and
away. But yeah, and
yeah, exactly.
I mean that's a
That's
lot on
just
a guy. That's a
that's
lot.
exactly
That's
yeah.
totally.
Yeah, no.
Rascal just joined me in this room here. My dog.
uh,
Yeah, but and then I mean, just to close up on the Steelers and their special team situation, with the kick returner and punt returner, you lost a good guy. You lost a good punt returner, kick returner, and Ray McLeod, and then you go out and you bring in another good one in Gunnar Olszewski. And I mean, at
oh yes.
first glance, you may think Ray McLeod was better last year. I mean, he led the league in punt return yards, and Gunnar Olszewski was third, so it's not like he was far behind. But
Yeah,
actually, when it came to averages, Gunnar Olszewski actually averaged more uh, yards. Yeah, actually averaged more yards per punt, I believe. And then in the kick return game, on less kick return attempts, he also averaged more kick return yards. So this is a guy that I think, he's got the experience, he's got the ability to do it. That's his role on the team. He's going to be he's definitely going to be a depth piece at wide receiver. You're not going to see him in actual wide receiver sets that often, but
right.
he's going to come in. That's going to be his job: is return kicks, return punts. And outside of that, that's his main role, and I think that's what he's going to come in and do. And I think you can expect him to be very good at that job.
Oh yeah, I would imagine that's literally what he does. I mean, that's just what he's good at. I mean, yeah, that'll be a good replacement. He'll be a good replacement.
And supposedly he's
Wherever he
also
goes.
molded into the locker room pretty well. So yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers are pretty set on special teams here. It's definitely one of their better position groups that they have kind of locked up here. And
Hmm.
yeah, Boswell, Harvin, and Gunnar Olszewski is what we're kind of rolling with.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid group right there. Not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so are we doing the Eagles like special teams now, or how are we
Yeah,
doing them?
let's move on to the Eagles.
All right. So Jake Elliott, I mean, I feel like he's one of the more underrated kickers in the league, maybe because he plays for Philly and Philly. Lots of people hate Philly, but but yeah, no, he actually this past year was his best year, career year. I believe we gave him an extension either this past year or the year before, but he's not going to slow down anytime soon. I firmly believe he'll be up there. At least I think he would be top 5 kicker. I think he deserves a bit more credit for what he did. I believe he only missed 5 kicks, missed 5 field goals this past year. So overall, I he's a surefire player to make the team. He's not going anywhere. He shouldn't be going anywhere. And if he does, well, I'm going to be really upset with someone. But but yeah, no, I think he's going to continue to kick for us really well for the next couple seasons. If I think he'll get like 90% around field goal. Yeah, field goal percent.
That would be kind of the goal with him.
Yeah, I think he'll
The
get there.
expectation.
He was a little shaky 2 seasons ago, but he
I
bounced back.
actually wrote that down, but that was only 2020 was the only year where he was really, I guess you could say, like, bad. But
Yeah,
again, he he was 14 for 19 on field goal attempts, so he didn't really have a ton of attempts. But
yeah,
every other season, he had at least 26 field goal attempts, and he was good. So I think it's just a matter of you got to run him out there, and he's going to get the job done the more attempts he has. I don't know what the reason is necessarily for that aberration. I don't know if there was a
yeah.
specific stretch where he struggled or whatnot. But every other season, when he's gotten upwards of 30 attempts, he's been really good. And I mean, last year, yeah, he was 30 for 33 on field goal attempts. So extremely solid. And he made all the extra point attempts he had last year as well.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say too. He made them all. Yeah, so he's a pretty damn good player
Yeah,
overall.
I know you said 90%, but I think even if he's around like 83, 85, 87%, I think you could still probably be happy with that, anywhere from 85 to 90 plus.
85 at least. But I think he could get 90. I think he's just gotten so much better as a kicker overall.
He's certainly
Um,
got it in him. You know what I always remember with him too, and like I've always been a fan of him for this, because like being a Steelers fan but living in New York State, everybody's like a Giants or Jets fan. So I
yeah.
kind of resent them a little bit. And that rookie year when he hit that game-winning
Oh yeah.
61-yard field goal, man, I always remember that. It was so awesome.
Yeah, that's literally the first thing that comes to mind when I think of him too. It's always that one.
Yeah.
That one field
I
goal.
mean, I still root for him just because it's like it's awesome, man.
Oh yeah, it is. No, that moment I'll forever remember. And when he kicked the field goal in the Super Bowl that basically clinched the win. It
Yeah.
made it an 8-point game, but basically put it away. Very clutch, ice in his veins, to say the
Yeah.
least.
I also expect him. I mean, he was 100% on extra points last year. I would expect him to be try to replicate it, but you got to be above 95,
Yeah, definitely. I think he will, unless he gets injured, but cross my fingers he doesn't. Um, Moving on to punter, Aaron Cepas. I didn't really like. He didn't overly impress me. Um, like he showed some flashes, some good flashes. He has potential. It's just with him, I think. Yeah, just sort of like Harvin, just gotta like be a bit better. I mean, he obviously didn't. He didn't go through any of what Harvin went through, but
Yeah.
I think overall, just working on his punt game. I mean, I don't have the numbers on like how many down inside the 20.
Well, I actually did write it down. I wrote it down because it's very curious because they're actually very comparable, the two of them.
Really
So yeah. So when it came to gross punting average, Sipas was 26th and Harvin was 28th. So they were, pretty close there. And then when it came to punts inside the opponent's 20, Sipas had 17 and Harvin had 25. Just to put it in perspective, Michael Dixon of the Seahawks, he led the NFL with 40. So I mean,
interesting.
they were they were off by a bit of the lead obviously, but I mean room for improvement for both for sure. And then one
Yeah,
other thing just to add real quick on him too is the fact that Dixon is an example of a guy who came over from Australia, played in their like rugby football or whatever they have in there over there. And I mean we've seen the success. So I think that if this guy gets more opportunities, you really got to work with him and kind of refine his punt game. I think there's a lot of potential there for him to be a real weapon for this for the Eagles if he can develop.
yeah. I mean, we'll see how this season goes, but I think he could be at least above average. But yeah, we will see about that. But moving on to kick return, punt return. Oh boy, Jalen Rigger returning. Oh god, no, that don't even. That's just no. Like he every time I watched him return anything, he just looked like. Considering he was a fast player and coming out of TCU, considering that was his defining trait, speed, he did not look fast at all returning punts or kicks. I don't know like what like and there were a couple of times where he was a bit indecisive. So I mean, part of that's also because he's young, so a little bit more growth from that. But I guess it's. I mean, we don't really have another alternative, if I'm being honest. I mean, other than maybe Greg Ward, who isn't that fast either. Kenny Gainwell maybe. He probably do better than Jalen Rigger, but I don't know. It's not very encouraging either of those two positions. It used to be a lot more encouraging when we had like Deshaun Jackson and like those kinds of
Or
players.
even like Darren Sproles back.
Darren Sproles too, yeah. Who obviously like we're shifty, like hard to touch, very fast players. We don't really have that at the moment, so it's not the most encouraging. To
Do you think do you think it's possible that the only reason? I mean, obviously Howie Roseman knows he like messed up the pick with Rieger at this point. It's clear and obvious. But do you think the only thing necessarily keeping him on the roster at this point is the fact that he's really your only outside of maybe Kenneth Gainwell and Greg Ward, like you said, he's the only real kick returner you have on the roster?
Honestly, yeah, but at this point, it's just like just get someone else to do it. Like I don't know. Like I put Devon Allen to do it. Like he's got speed. Like make him return punts or something. Like I feel like he would make the roster if he could return punts and kicks.
Yeah,
but
I'm actually curious. I'm gonna try and see if he actually did in college or at all or not. But
I just don't. It's just not encouraging at all. It's really underwhelming to say the least about kick and punt returns. But
so yeah, I mean, yeah, his freshman year, Devon Allen did return eight kicks. He didn't return any punts, but I mean, he averaged 26 yards of return.
I feel like he could probably contribute to special teams. I like wrote that down like half jokingly. It was like maybe there's a chance for that.
I mean, there's a lot of young guys. I haven't like obviously every team's gonna have young guys at the start of OTAs and training camps and everything like that. I haven't looked into depth how many of them have experience returning punts, but I think it's interesting because if Jalen Rieger can improve kick returning, I don't know what his real role on the roster is. There's clearly a hierarchy of wide receivers that the Eagles are going to prioritize over him.
No, he's like fourth best receiver at best, not even maybe fifth. But yeah, we'll see how that unfolds. But I really don't expect much from either of those two. But I mean, kicker and punter. Yeah, kicker's obviously our best position out of special teams. Punter, average. Kick return, punt return below average.
So I think we'd agree overall the Steelers are in a little bit better of a position than the Steelers when it comes to special teams as a whole.
Yeah, I would say that definitely. Like, that's a safe one. Yes.
I mean, for as good as Jake Elliott is, I think Boswell still has the edge over him. Cepas and Harvin are pretty even, and then Gunnar Olszewski clearly the much better option.
Oh yeah, that's
than,
not even
than
close.
Regal. So,
Yeah.
all right, man. You got any other final thoughts for us?
Nah, man. Looking forward to more episodes with you, man. This will be fun breaking down positions and talking about the latest news. I'm sure there'll be more to come. Oh, we didn't talk about this. Quick thing, last thing. The Eagles, the Lincoln Financial Field, will be hosting a World Cup game or World Cup games. I don't know how many, but that's really cool. 2026. Hoping to
imagine
be there.
if the U.S. or Mexico or one of those teams that obviously we have links to is playing there. That'd be pretty cool.
I would hope so. I don't care what the price is. I'm going to whatever game. It's just
yeah, man. I saw Vancouver's hosting a game too.
Yeah,
got me thinking like, man, if the U.S. plays out, well, I don't know if they're gonna play in Vancouver, but if they do, I'll plan a whole trip out there. I'll go watch a World Cup game. I'll get some skiing in British Columbia, man. I'll make a whole week out of it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's exciting. But yeah, that's the only other news I really have. But yeah.
Right. Sounds good, man. Yeah, like I said, we'll be breaking down another position group next week, updating you guys on all the latest news regarding the Steelers and Eagles. As for that, I think we are pretty much set here. So until then, we will speak with you guys later.